Hi there, I'm Alison, and I'm here with Tade Thompson, author of our latest read for the New Scientist Bookclub, Rosewater. It's a science fiction novel. It's the first in a trilogy, and I've absolutely loved it. I read it while I was on holiday. It's set in a near future version of Nigeria in a community which has grown up around a mysterious alien biodome. So, welcome to the New Scientist Bookclub.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thanks for coming along. Can we start by having you tell us a little bit about anything in particular that inspired you to write Rosewater?
Um, well, I could say that it has something to do with what I see in alien invasion stories. It's always, oh, here are these aliens coming to, they want to come and destroy the earth or come and take resources or take our people or whatever. All right. Even if you go along the narratives of, say, conspiracy theories of alien abductions, cattle, mutilations and stuff like that, it's always they're coming to get something. But to me, it's always been, well, it's colonialism, really. That's really what it is. A superior technological civilization goes to one that is less advanced and takes over, basically. So I figure, okay, we need to have major alien invasion narratives that happen in Africa. That's At least that was one of the things that I was thinking of when I was doing it and all of that. And I was also thinking generally in terms of like all the things I had read, about um, CIA experiments, things like that. Whenever you're writing new things, you always kind of pull from all kinds of sources. There's always everything that interests you wants to make its way into the book, and you have to actually hold back and not just dump everything in there.
I can
Because
imagine. But so yeah, that kind of leads on to my next question. So this is a story of alien first contact, right? But you choose to start your story a bit after the first contact has happened. So why was that? What was your thinking there? And were you tempted at any point to kind of include that sort of the aliens have landed type bit?
okay. The truth of the matter is that I initially wrote 40,000 words of this, and discarded them. In those 40,000 words were how the alien got here, how the alien got to Nigeria, how all the different cities or the countries of the world reacted and all of that. And I realized two things immediately. One, I was telling it from the wrong point of view. And two, we've heard all of this before. None of this is new. All right. None of this is new. Alien lands on Earth is not a new thing at all. So I'm like, nobody needs to know this. So I cut all of that and I started again.
I really want to
And
read it now, though.
maybe in the 10th anniversary edition, we'll just add those words to it just to, just so that it has extra stuff.
Yeah, the
Um,
extended uncut version. I like it.
yes, exactly. And the truth of the matter is that people read books not necessarily because of the situation that the book presents, but because of people. So I realized that I had to start it with a person, and that person had to lead us into that world. And so that's what led me to a rather mundane opening, which was an opening in a bank, really, you know. But I thought this is the way to do it. Quiet opening with a person doing a job you can relate to, and use that and then start introducing the bizarre slowly.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us then about writing Caro, who is a very unheroic kind of a hero, which is something that I loved about him. I found him so kind of laconic and amusing. Did you have fun writing him?
I did. He's a mixture of two people. One of them is my younger brother, and the other is a criminal that I once met. Yeah, he was a sneak thief. I met a sneak thief. I I went to prison to go and visit someone once, and I met this guy, and there was a delay, because I was there to see prisoners for a particular study I was doing, but there was a delay, and I got talking to this guy, and we talked and talked and talked, and he was telling me his life story, and how he stole, and how he was almost lynched, and all of that. And I was like, okay, really, I soaked all of that up. It wasn't enough, but I figured, okay, my younger brother, I liked my younger brother's kind of personality as well, as in kind of like he is the anti-hero, not in the anti-hero definition, where it's like he's the least heroic person you will ever meet. So I kind of merged the two of them together, and that's where Kara came from.
Writing someone like that is unheroic, and you're wanting to give a true impression of him, but also see him from the outside too. And I think that you do that really well.
The further you go in the series, the Kara actually is sidelined, and
Okay.
I've never liked the idea of the chosen one or the one to whom everybody must bow. I've never really liked that at all. In catastrophes, generally people tend to cooperate. It tends not to be due to one chosen person who fixes everything.
You have a great line from one of the characters who says, "I'm tired of women and men of destiny. The idea of a singular hero and a manifest destiny just makes us all lazy." And I think that really comes through.
Exactly. And it never happens. That's not what happens. If you look at Hurricane, you know, Katrina, if you look at every catastrophe humans have been involved in, it's never one person. It's always people coming together to solve the problem.
Hmm.
So I sometimes think that one of the problems we have in science fiction and fantasy, and even the way movies are made and everything, to narrow things down to one person who represents all the good that is being done, I think it gives us the wrong kind of expectations in life, basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would rather write something that is more representative of reality.
Yeah, and Caro can do a lot to change the world, but sometimes he just feels a bit too lazy to be bothered to do anything.
Yes, I mean, look, if there were ever a Superman, he would have days where he just doesn't feel like it.
Yeah,
Okay, he would have days where like, you know what? Yeah, fine. I'm not saving that cat from that tree today. I'm just gonna chill today. He would have that. You know, it's not just about being able to do something physically, but it's also what is your mental state on that particular day. You are not going to save the world every day. Some
yeah,
days you're just going to be like, okay, you know what? Can't do it today.
yeah. I
Can't
like
do it.
that. I like that. Tell us a bit about what inspired the concept of the xenosphere, which sensitives in your world can have access to. For me, I found it really easy to believe in. I was totally all in for the xenosphere.
So I think this novel, Michael Crichton's novel, The Andromeda Strain, which talked about a down satellite and then it infected a small town in America and they were trying to contain it and all of that. But and I was a kid when I read that, but that the roots of it are in there. Like the idea that there's this invisible thing, aliens that were tiny, that were invisible, that were microbes, they're not from Earth, and they were spreading everywhere without us knowing. That was where the seed of it came from. And
Hmm.
so I was trying to think of a way, because one of the things that had always interested me was the CIA's experiments on on ESP. They did all kinds of ridiculous experiments. One of them they did from the moon, actually, on Apollo 14. They did an ESP experiment to see if someone could communicate with a psychic on Earth from the moon. You
Right.
know, um, which is really ridiculous. But anyway, I was trying to tell myself, okay, well, if people could, how could people hear each other's thoughts and everything? And I read an article about these co-joined twins who could really, who had connected, their brain was connected physically to each other, so they had some of their sensations and impressions of each other.
Mm.
So I said, okay, that's the solution. That it can happen if there's a connection between, because if you're communicating, there has to be a connection between the sender and the receiver and vice versa. So I said, okay, fine. What if a microscopic connection between different people? You can't
Hmm.
see it, but it's there. And I said, okay, fine. But how would that be? So then it then came, okay, the Andromeda strain, there were these aliens. Okay, fine. It's aliens. Okay, but what would it look like? And it was like, it will be a fungal network that's invisible and it will be downloading from everybody into it. So that instead of aliens coming to Earth and saying, take me to your leader, it'll be like, okay, we've got all the information, it's already in this network, so we'll just take it. And
Mm.
that's how I came up with that.
Yeah. Well, I think it works brilliantly. I totally believed in it.
Of course, it was also partially a reflection of the internet as well. It was more like it's kind of like the internet, but for aliens.
The internet for aliens. That's great. I loved. There's one bit where you sort of talk about the internet as this old technology. We're past that now. We're onto the
Yeah.
new stuff. I liked the distance into the future that you had set the book. It's kind of far enough away for some cool stuff to have developed, but not far enough away for it to seem unreachable or unbelievable. Was that carefully planned by you? The kind of 2060s setting.
Yes. So I always prefer near future to far future. Again, I'm trying to talk to people. Well, I'm trying to talk to readers. So if it is too far in the future, I always feel like it's a barrier. People just won't, the technology will be so out of this world that people won't relate to it. I want a way to relate to the reader so that that's not a barrier to reading the book. Like you can read it and okay, it's in the future, but it's not so alien to us. It is close enough that we could see ourselves doing these things. I didn't use any science that you can't extrapolate from today.
Hmm.
One of the things that I argued with an editor about was, it wasn't in this book, it was in the second book. I had a sideways moving elevator. And well, she was like, "That's ridiculous." I said, "They already exist." And I sent her the information. They already exist. As to whether they get propagated or not, that's a different thing. But they
Hmm.
already exist. Everything, even the outlandish things. So, like when you get to book 3, for example, there are these micro brains that are used to test how they will get rid of the bigger alien. Well, they're called brainoids. We already have those. You can grow them in the lab already. So nothing that even the things that seem the most outlandish, they're extrapolated from what we have now, or from what
Mm.
has been done.
Interesting.
So
And when you're writing, are you kind of researching around all of this stuff, or are you drawing
oh
from what
no
you
no
know?
no 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 no
No,
no
no,
no no
no.
no.
Okay.
Research is the death of actual writing. The way I do it. I mean, I've just finished a book that was research heavy, for example, because it's set in it's set in the 6th century. Um, I don't research too much before writing because it can be a reason to stop writing. You can get into the research rabbit hole, and then you won't do the actual writing of the thing. So what I do is I do some research before I start, and then I start, and I just leave gaps there. I'll research this. I'll research this. I'll research this. So that I go all the way through to the end of the first draft, and then I start researching things. Otherwise, it will stop you from progress, from actually writing the thing you want to write.
Interesting. I think that's probably an unusual approach. I would have imagined that people mostly sort of had vast amounts of research done and then got writing. But I can see your point.
It's an obstacle sometimes. It depends on what you're writing. I mean, like for the book that I've just finished, like I told you, I had to do a lot of research because it's the 6th century. It's too far away from anything I'm familiar with. All
Hmm.
right. But I knew that, okay, I was extrapolating for Rosewater, I was extrapolating into the future. So I said this will probably happen, but I'll research it when I
Yeah.
finish and all that. So some things I had to discard entirely, but others, and I discovered new things. So on balance, it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. You've got some super scary, gross stuff in this book. For example, your meat temple.
Everybody comes back to the meat temple.
Well,
The meat temple was actually a nightmare I had. It was a nightmare I had, and I directly transcribed the nightmare. Like literally, I was in this
oh God.
temple that was
Yeah.
made of meat, and I was trying to walk. I was trying to get out of it, but like it's meat, so you sink into it. So I was sinking into it as I was walking and everything, and I had the meat smell, all of it. It was completely disgusting. And I woke up and I just wrote it down, and it survived in all drafts of the book until the last one. It's there are very little changes that have been made to that particular scene.
And did it exercise the nightmare writing it down?
Yes, it did. It did. But even as soon as I woke up, I said this belongs in a book. So I didn't even hesitate. I just started writing it down. I didn't
Yeah.
hesitate.
Build the book around the meat temple. I like it. And you have a great line at one point where Caro says, "We have more experience than any Western country in dealing with first contact." Was it obvious to you from the start that you would set this story in Nigeria?
Yes. Um, I The thing is, one of the things I've always kind of worried about when reading a lot of science fiction is that the it's lost its referent. It's lost the reason that it exists. Even if you go back to the War of the Worlds, the idea was that, look, this is a commentary on imperialism. It's not. Don't look at don't get stuck in the image. It's referring to something. And one of the problems that we have, especially with the proliferation of science fictional television and all kinds of things, like we've got streaming and other things, so people are creating so many things. The tendency is to forget what an image means and then just produce the image. And that's what I see in a lot of alien invasion stories. You know, it's about the spaceships, it's about the weapons, it's about the fights, the dogfights, and all of that. But the actual core message of what does it mean? What is the meaning of an alien invasion is lost. And so in some parts of Rosewater, I was explicit. This is one of them. Like, look, if aliens are coming, we've negotiated with aliens more than anybody else. So if you've ever been colonized, then you know how to negotiate with aliens, and we should be the ones to do it.
Leave it to the Nigerians.
Leave it to the Nigerians or any other nation that's been colonized.
Yeah, yeah. You are also a full-time, I think, psychiatrist. Is that right?
Oh, I stopped medical practice in January this year.
Oh, okay. But when you were writing Rosewater, you were working.
I was working full time when I was writing it. Yes, I was working
How
full time.
and why did you decide to fit fiction into that life? Because it must have been pretty full on.
So I started writing because I like writing. I started selling um, stories because I just wanted to fund my book habit. I have a massive addiction to books. So
As we can see behind you.
so the point, so initially I had my ambitions were just I'll sell a few short stories and I'll use that to buy books because my wife was saying, well, look, why do you just keep buying books and everything like that? And if because I'm not, these books are my luxury, they're my work, they're my luxury, they're the things I enjoy doing. So I will buy like any expensive edition of anything at all, and all that. So she was like, okay, you know what? Sell stories, and then whatever money you get from that, you can use that to buy your books. How's that? And which seems fair enough. So I started doing that,
Mm,
Um, and I knew I had a book in me, so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to write this book as well, with no real intent. Like it was more of an artistic endeavor. I had no intention of actually selling it. My first book was a crime book called Making Wolf, and I sold it to a small press because for me, I just want it out there. It's not, and obviously I had to focus on medical practice, so I wasn't really interested in publishing as this thing that I should be a big professional in.
hmm
So I sold that, and then when I wrote Rosewater, I just went to a small press as well. I said, "Okay, look here, here's the book," and they published it. That was Apex in America, but it kept selling and selling and selling and selling. But that wasn't even my problem. My problem was they started getting calls and emails from other countries saying they want to translate it. And of course, they didn't have the translation rights. So they started sending the emails to me. And I was like, okay, this is just too much. This is because I had to start fielding emails. I'm like, okay, I don't want to do this. I went and got this is literally the reason I got an agent was because of translation rights for Rosewater.
hmm
So I got an agent, and then they sold it to Orbit, and then took over all the translation stuff, and that kind of gave me leeway and all of that. And I think I guess this is my publication journey because in the end, published all of that, published some other things, and it became something that was now competing with medicine for my time, and the competition
hmm
was too much. So this year I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to just write. I'll just write and then see where it goes from there. I can always, go back to medicine whenever I want, whenever it suits me, you know.
hmm
So yeah, and here I am.
Yeah. With a Arthur C. Clarke Award under your belt for Rosewater.
Yeah, and some others, yes, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
It was I was in Spain when it happened anyway. I liked I liked that because again I spent a lot of my childhood reading Arthur C. Clarke and watching Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. So that was quite good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Amazing. I've got a handful of questions from some of the book club members as well for you.
all right.
So I've got one from Alan who wonders, how do you go about creating a huge world like this one without a huge word count?
Okay. So the first thing you do is you create the world knowing that the reader doesn't need to know all of that. The best canvas is the mind of the reader. So you don't have to paint it on the page, you have to paint it in the head of the reader.
Mm,
So rather than taking everything and dumping it in there, what you do is you suggest it enough that any person who reads the words will complete it in their head. And that's what you have to aim for. And to be honest, in any writing, that's what's being done anyway.
mm,
You have to suggest it so that the person actively creates it. If you put everything on the page, people get bored because people are not using their brains, and people like to use their brains.
mm,
So the idea is that okay, I will give you three. There's this in architecture. There's this idea of negative space where you create three sides, and the person creates the fourth side to make a
hmm
square. So that's what you do. You remove one of the sides so that the person thinks of the rest of it.
yeah,
Um, it's never a good idea to tell everybody everything. You
yeah,
just tell them enough, and that's what I do.
yeah,
I try
yeah.
and find out what exactly is enough.
That's the tough thing, I guess. For me, sort of on the structure of the book as well, I forgot to ask before, timelines. How did you deal with writing these separate timelines and moving back and forth? Was it tricky?
It wasn't. I actually kept the whole thing in my head. Everybody asks me that, but and I think that if I tried to write Rosewater today, I would probably actually draw a chart. But when I was writing this, I had all of it in my head. I had all the timelines and everything right in my head. The idea was to write something that unfolded in the way people tell stories. So people never tell linear stories. People tell stories and then, okay, wait, I forgot to say this, and they jump back and they jump back, and forth and everything. That's what. So I wanted to write in a way that, okay, if I were telling this story, would I jump back and forth? Yes, I would. Okay, that's how I told it. So I just told, so I had the linear story in my head, and then I started telling it in the way a conversation would happen.
I always imagine it with things like that someone would write all of one bit and then chop it and put it together. So interesting to hear how you actually
Yeah.
did it.
I kept it in my head. I mean, I now if I'm thinking about it, I'm like, why did I do that? I could have just written it down. But I don't know. At the time, I kept it in my head, and I just started picking bits of it
Yeah,
and started writing it. And what I was doing also was that I was picking the bits that were interesting, so that it helped me to screen out what wasn't interesting.
yeah, yeah. I get
So
it.
if you imagine people in front of you, you're talking, to people in front of you and everything, and which parts would make them bored. Okay, they don't need to say that because they're going to get bored. I'll move to the next thing that's interesting, move to the next thing that's interesting, and then read it through to see, does it make enough sense as it is? Yes, it does. Then I'm not telling you the rest of the boring stuff.
Yeah, got it, got it. So, reader Kim, this is a comment really, but she's talking about the concept of the opening and says she found it to be an almost religious celebration for the observers. Was that your intention?
Yes, it was religious, and it was inspired by religious events. When I was a kid in Nigeria, they used to have these things called revivals, and revivals were these Christian fundamentalist healing services, and they took place in gigantic tents, and that's actually what inspired the dome. There were these gigantic tents on a field, and you would go there, and there would be so many people going there to be healed. So yeah, it's supposed to evoke that because it
Hmm.
was inspired by a religious event.
Yeah, excellent. And then final reader comment is from Emma, who has ordered the next ones in the trilogy. She says something that kind of echoes back to a point that you made before. She likes the fact about the book that it's mostly about people adapting and normalizing a new situation. And it's not really a question either, I guess, but I think that's exactly what you were saying earlier, I think.
Yes, although what I would add to that is like everybody. One of the things I hate, one of the general narratives about Africa that I hate, is that Africans are suffering. I hate it when people say that. Because what tends to happen is that, okay, yes, life can be harsh, but people adapt to it, and there is so much joy. Like, you need to live there to understand that there is actually joy there. They will adapt and be happy in their neighbors and in their families and everything. This is what happens. It only seems a particular way from the outside, but yeah, there's hardship, but people adapt to pretty much anything.
Mm,
People will adapt to anything. There were
yeah.
people who live. There were people who were sentenced to Siberia. They still had to live, and they did.
Mm.
So yeah, it is the adaptability of the people. That's one of the things I was trying to bring out.
Absolutely, even to a giant alien biodome landing
Yes.
plug in the middle of your neighborhood. Like Emma, I've also ordered the next in the trilogy. How could I not when you end on the line, for this disaster we will all be present, for this we will all have front row seats. Can you give us a little glimpse of what we have to look forward to next?
Well, what you have to live forward to next is Rosewater trying to become an independent city state and all the fractures that brings about. Now you
Mhm.
will see people who have been mentioned in Rosewater, who were peripheral people in Rosewater, take the front stage. Take more of the front stage. Kara actually takes a back seat
Mhm.
in Rosewater Insurrection, and other people come on stage to to see how this particular part of the story plays out. Kara doesn't go away, but this it this I wouldn't say the second book is his story. The second book is a story for others. It's more of a story of the city itself and the consequences and all of that. It reflects a thing that happened in Nigerian history, where people were, something that led to the civil war in Nigeria, where people were marginalized and some of them were killed. So they kind of decided to secede, and it didn't go well.
Mhm.
But I took some inspiration from that.
I will have to read it. Weekend is coming up, so I'll be ready for it then. Thank you, Tade, so much for coming on to chat to us in the New Scientist Book Club. I've really appreciated it, and I could have asked you lots more questions, but I'll let you get on with your day. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.